She was an introverted photographer, quiet and watchful behind the lens. He, a millionaire who'd lost everything, vanished from the world for 3 long years. A single accidental shutter click, a photo captured at sunset, when silence is finally broken. Can an honest gaze be enough to heal them both? Some encounters happen only once in a lifetime. The girl had a habit of counting her steps along the dirt path winding up the hill, not for any particular reason, just to keep her thoughts from unraveling. Each step was a whispered reminder, "I'm still here today." At the hilltop, she laid an old cloth over the grass, set her camera beside her, and pulled out a worn notebook, an old ritual. The wind fluttered through pages filled with scraps of dialogue never finished, fragments of confession she never reread. A small bird landed nearby, nodded once, and flew off. The sun brushed against the treetops like fingers stroking a faded memory. She raised her camera, not aiming at anything in particular. People like her, quiet, inward, didn't need a reason to observe. They watched the world the way others breathed. And then, somewhere in the blurred edges of the frame, he appeared, not suddenly, not loudly, but as if he'd always been there. She hadn't seen him arrive, didn't know when he might leave. But in that moment he was there, close enough to be real, distant enough to feel unfamiliar. He didn't look around, didn't check his phone, didn't show a flicker of expression. He simply stood, silent as a forgotten memory. The way he held himself reminded her of shadowy figures in oil paintings, unclear in form yet haunting in their very vagueness. She adjusted her lens slowly, though there was no need, just to stretch the moment, as if taking this photograph, meaningless to anyone else, might mean something immense to her. When she pressed the shutter, something strange happened. The world paused for a single beat. A leaf held itself mid-fall, the wind forgot to blow, and the click of the camera rang out, with the clarity of a heartbeat. Click. For a breath, her eyes drifted from the viewfinder. She hadn't meant to look at him, but instinct did it for her. And unexpectedly, he turned. Their eyes didn't quite meet, but something in the air between them caught, an invisible snag. Not recognition, not curiosity, something else. Like being called by name in a language without sound. He said nothing, just glanced toward the wind, then turned and walked away. She held her breath, unsure if it was fear of being seen or fear that she'd just lost. Something she hadn't yet understood. The sun was almost gone now, the sky stained in streaks of violet and gold, as if someone were mixing memory with tears. She packed up her camera carefully, like cradling something alive. On the walk home, her heart beat in quiet, deliberate thuds. Not because of him, but because of the feeling that she had just witnessed something no one else had. Something deeper than beauty, larger than sorrow. A moment of being seen in a world too busy to truly see anyone at all. She didn't know his name, not his age, not why he'd stood there. But she knew what it felt like to go unnoticed. And today, with a single shutter click, she'd done something small, something that for someone might mean everything. That night, the girl fell asleep on the sofa, her arms wrapped around the camera like it was a secret diary. The lamp was still on, casting a pale golden light across the ceiling, like the last flicker of sunlight refusing to die. Outside, the window, a soft rain had begun to fall, each drop tapping against the railing like the quiet heartbeat of someone who never learned to take up space. Her phone buzzed once, then again, and again. She stirred at 3:17. That's strange. Hour that belongs neither to night nor to morning. Squinting at the screen, she saw a stream of unfamiliar notifications. Someone just shared your post. You have 10 new likes. Who is this man? She blinked, confused, then opened the post. The photo of the man standing still. Beneath the soft sunset glow now had hundreds of likes, climbing by the second. Her chest tightened, not with joy, but with something closer to disquiet. It felt as though something sacred, something private, had been flung wide open in the middle of a crowded square. What's happening? She whispered, her lips dry, her fingers trembling slightly. Comments began pouring in like a stream that wouldn't stop. I don't know who he is, but this picture says so much. I feel like I've been this man. Does anyone recognize him? Looks familiar. Some tagged their friends, others left heart emojis, but a few comments made her shrink into herself. This is fake staged content. Why take photos of strangers? Creepy. Did he even give permission? She pulled the blanket tighter, feeling cold. Not from the weather, but from all the unfamiliar doors now opening inside her. The photo, once a gentle, fleeting act, had become a public spectacle. Some called it beautiful, some art. But others were angry, suspicious and cruel. She reread the caption she'd written. Sometimes we don't realize how beautiful we look in someone else's lens. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. It had felt true, something she genuinely believed. But now, it no longer belonged to her. She opened her profile. Her follower count had surged. Messages blinked in, one after another. Reporters, bloggers, influencers she didn't know. One wanted to buy rights to the photo. Another asked, "Do you have any other shots of him?" She folded her phone closed and set it down, as though it had become a ticking device. In the kitchen, she poured a glass of water. In the faint reflection of the fridge door, she saw herself. Pale face, hair rumpled from sleep, eyes wide and unsure, like a child who'd accidentally broken something precious. In her mind, she saw him again. The man beneath the sunset. Still and quiet, completely unaware the world was about to chase him. Did he want this in, she wondered, and her heart beat a little faster. Guilt crept in like early morning fog blanketing a field. Silent, inevitable. The next morning she received her first message from a stranger. "I know this man, or I used to. If it were you, would you delete the photo?" A beautiful moment, but what if the person inside it just wanted to disappear forever? Tell me, what would you do? She received the message on a grey Wednesday morning. The air was crisp, the sky low, and the rain came in light, scattered drops like broken thoughts. "I know the man in your photo." From an anonymous account. She almost deleted it. Over the past few days, her inbox had flooded. Praise, judgment, speculation, even condemnation. But this message, brief, quiet, without exclamations or emojis, made her pause. His name is Julian Hale. He used to run Hale Concepts. Look it up. Her fingers moved as if on instinct. She typed each letter carefully, like handling something fragile and old. Julian Hale. The results came fast and overwhelming. Articles, photographs, archived interviews. She wasn't used to this world, the world of names that carried weight. But the deeper she scrolled, the clearer it became. This was the man in her photo. Once he had been a tech phenomenon, the founder of Hale Concepts, a trailblazing AI company that defined an era. Young, charismatic, wealthy, married, to an artist. On magazine covers, his smile suggested the world had never denied him a thing. Then, the car accident. His wife died. He vanished. No press release, no farewell to the company. No explanation. 3 years passed, and the world forgot him, as it does with those once adored, until her photograph. She turned off her screen and leaned back. The small room seemed to shrink around her. The light from the window no longer felt warm. Everything had shifted, as if she'd accidentally stirred a spirit meant to remain untouched. Who did I photograph? A reclusive millionaire. A man wrapped in an old wound. Someone who chose to disappear and was pulled back by the snap of a shutter. She felt she'd trespassed on something sacred, not because of his name, but because of his eyes in the photo. Eyes not meant for the public. Eyes that belonged to someone trying not to be seen, and she had dragged him into the light, where he might no longer wish to stand. That afternoon, as the sun dimmed behind clouds, her phone rang. A call from an unknown number. She stared at the screen for a long time, her finger hovering. Then she answered. The voice was low, rough, with a long silence before speaking. "You're the girl who took that photo." Not a question, a statement. She gripped the phone tighter. Her heart thudded. She tried to respond, but no words came. He continued quietly, like wind skimming the rim of a glass. "I didn't ask to be found." She inhaled. I didn't know who you were. I just saw you standing there in the light. I just thought you saw something meaningful." He cut in, not angry, not cruel, but tired, in a way that left no room for denial. "You didn't." The silence that followed felt vast. She could hear nothing, but the hammering of her own pulse, her breath quick and unsteady, as if she'd been pushed out of someplace safe. "You've reminded people I exist. That's not kindness." His voice dropped lower. "That's cruelty with good intentions." Then the click of the line going dead. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just sat there, phone still in hand, eyes fixed on the space ahead of her, as if waiting for the room to speak back. And then the shattering began, soft, slow. Tears welled, not with sound but weight. She pressed a hand over her mouth as if that could contain the overflow, but nothing could. What have I done? She walked to her desk, turned on the camera, and the image appeared. The man, in the sunset light, a photo the world now called beautiful, but to her in that moment it felt like evidence of a boundary crossed. Her finger hovered over the delete button, paused. She couldn't press it. Not out of vanity, not to cling to the spotlight, but because that photo to her was memory. It was connection. However brief, however unspoken, it was the first time in her life she had seen someone without needing them to say a word. He's not invisible. I saw him, but maybe he didn't want to be seen. She put the camera away, this time more gently than ever, like apologizing to something living. That night she didn't sleep. She lay curled on the couch, staring at the ceiling, her mind circling back through images. Julian, young and radiant beside his wife. Julian vanished. Julian caught in her frame beneath the golden dusk, and his voice quiet but sharp. That's cruelty with good intentions. She knew she hadn't meant to hurt anyone, but she also understood harm doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it's born from innocence, and even innocence can leave the deepest cuts. She received the message on a quiet Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that felt hushed and hesitant, cold enough to pull your sleeves down, grey enough to blur the edges of things. Rain tapped lightly at the windows, like fragments of thought too gentle to stay. "I know the man in your photo." From an anonymous account, she nearly deleted it. Over the past few days, her inbox had been overwhelmed. Praise, speculation, criticism, even outrage. But this line, short, calm, without punctuation or emojis, made her pause. His name is Julian Hale. He used to run Hale Concepts. Look it up. Her fingers moved, almost without thinking. She typed each letter with a strange, fragile weight, like holding an antique you weren't sure you had permission to touch. Julian Hale. The results came fast, a flood. Articles, press photos, old interviews. She wasn't used to this world, the world of names that carried gravity. But the deeper she scrolled, the more undeniable it became. This was him. Years ago, he had been a tech icon, the mind behind Hale Concepts, a revolutionary AI company that helped shape a decade. Young, magnetic, brilliant, married, to an artist, smiling on magazine covers with the ease of someone to whom life had always said yes. Then the accident. His wife died, and he disappeared. No statement, no farewell, no explanation. 3 years passed. The world moved on, as it always does with those it once adored, until her photograph. She switched off the screen and leaned her head back against the chair. The small room seemed to fold in around her. Even the light from the window felt cold now. As if she had touched something she wasn't meant to touch, disturbed a presence that had chosen silence. Who did I photograph? A reclusive millionaire. A man still mourning. Someone who had chosen to vanish, and was pulled back by the accidental press of a shutter. She felt a quiet guilt blooming in her chest, not because of who he had been, but because of his eyes in the photo. They weren't meant for the world. They belonged to someone trying not to be seen. And she had brought him back into a light he may never have wished to stand under again. That afternoon, as the sun waned, her phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. She stared at the screen, breath caught, finger frozen. And then she answered. The voice on the other end was low, rough, and full of silence before it spoke. "You're the girl who took that photo." It wasn't a question, it was a fact. She gripped the phone tightly, her heart beat too fast. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He continued, softly, like wind catching the edge of a glass. "I didn't ask to be found." She took a breath, steadying herself. I didn't know who you were, and I just saw you standing in that light, and I just thought you saw something meaningful," he interrupted. Not angry, not unkind, just tired in a way that made the air feel heavier. "You didn't." The silence that followed was immense. She heard only the drum of her heartbeat and the sound of her own breath, fast, shallow, like she'd been shoved outside of safety. "You've reminded people I exist." "That's not kindness," he said quietly. "That's cruelty with good intentions." And then the call ended. She didn't cry. Not immediately. She just sat there, phone still in hand, staring into a space that refused to give her an answer. Then slowly, quietly, everything broke. Tears came without sound as she pressed her hand to her mouth, as if that could stop them. It didn't. What did I do? She got up, walked to the desk, turned on the camera. The image blinked. Into view. The man in the amber light of sunset. A picture the world now praised. But here, in this moment, it felt like a violation. Her finger hovered over the delete button, paused. It trembled. She couldn't press it. Not out of vanity, not to protect her moment of fame, but because the photo to her was more than just light and shadow. It was memory, it was connection. It was the first time she had ever seen someone without needing them to explain who they were. He wasn't invisible. I saw him, but maybe he didn't need to be seen. She put the camera away gently this time, as if apologizing to something living. That night she didn't sleep. She lay curled on the couch, eyes on the ceiling, mind caught in the blur of images. Julian laughing beside his wife. Julian disappearing. Julian in the soft light of her lens. And finally, his voice. That's cruelty with good intentions. She hadn't meant to hurt anyone, but she knew now. Harm doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from innocence, from not knowing the weight of what you hold in your hands, and sometimes innocence leaves the deepest cuts. The letter arrived on a sunlit morning. She hadn't expected it, least of all through the post. Among a sea of unread emails, social media messages, and the constant noise of notifications, a single cream-colored envelope lay quietly in the doorframe. No return address. Just one line, handwritten in soft ink, to the one who saw me. She sat down by the window, fingertips tracing the edge of the envelope. Outside, sunlight fell gently onto the balcony, a quiet promise of peace. She opened it slowly, unfolding the paper with care. The handwriting leaned slightly, the ink dark against aged paper, tired almost, as though the writer had carried each word a long way. I used to think I could erase myself from the world without leaving a hole. When my wife died, something inside me stopped moving. She was the center of the life I built, the breath within everything I thought I controlled. After the accident, I stayed in the city a few weeks longer, just long enough to realize that no one really needed me there anymore. No more meetings, no more plans, no more questions. I left quietly, without a word, and no one asked. I wandered. A few weeks here, a few months there. Sometimes I rented a cabin in the mountains. Sometimes it was a small room by the lake. I thought I'd forget. I thought the world would forget me too. I didn't plan to return. I didn't want to be recognized. I wanted my invisibility to be a choice, not just the outcome of grief. She paused. One hand pressed lightly against her chest, as if to steady something inside. The morning light made the ink glow softly, as though the writer himself were whispering just behind the page. And then you took that photograph. And more than that, you wrote that I was beautiful. Beautiful in a gaze without expectation, without condition, without question. Not because of who I once was or what I had lost, but simply because I was there. For the first time in years, I saw myself through someone else's eyes, not through reputation or legacy, just as a man, in a moment, at first I felt anger, then fear, then emptiness. But later that night, looking at the photo, not with my eyes, but with memory, I realized that part of me had been locked away too long. I'm not writing to apologize or accuse. I'm writing because you should know. That photo didn't just return me to the world, it returned me to myself. You saw me not as a vanished millionaire, not as a man who once succeeded and then disappeared, but as a person, a figure in the sunset, alone and full of contradictions. She took a deep breath, as if bracing herself against the tenderness rising in her chest. I don't know who you are, but thank you. Thank you for seeing without asking me to explain. Thank you for letting the light be enough. And if you're reading this, know that I'm still here. Still by the lake, sometimes at dusk, when the water is still and the wind brushes through the reeds. If one day you wish to return, not to apologize, not to explain, but simply to sit beside someone who was once seen, then I'll be there. Julian. There was no ornate signature. Just the name, and a final stretch of blank space, as if making room for silence. She folded the letter carefully, as if it were something that might break. No tears came, no sudden swell of emotion, only a deep, steady quiet. And something inside her, that part which had curled inward from fear, began gently to unfold. That morning she woke earlier than usual. Sunlight slipped through the slats of the blinds, casting a pale streak across the worn wooden floor. She sat up, pulling the blanket from her shoulders. Her mind was still foggy, but something inside her already knew what the day was asking of her. The letter still rested in the drawer by her desk, but she didn't need to open it again. She remembered every word, especially the last lines. If one day you wish to return, not to apologize, not to explain, but simply to sit beside someone who was once seen, then I'll be there. The old lake, the familiar hill, the same landscape, but the people, they were no longer the same. She pulled on a beige cardigan, slipped a water bottle, a small notebook, and the folded letter into her bag. In her hand, the old camera, not to take pictures, but to hold, her breath steady. Part memory, part compass, part quiet reminder. She didn't know if he would really be there. She wasn't sure she had the courage to face him, but she knew this. Silence could also be a kind of lie, and she was done hiding from herself. The bus carried her through streets she knew by heart, then into the softer quiet of the suburbs. Each bend in the road brought with it fragments of memory. The light that afternoon, the sensation of seeing him through the lens, the thud in her chest when she realized she'd done something far bigger than she understood. She stepped off and walked the rest of the way. The dirt path leading up the hill was unchanged, still lined with fallen leaves, still hushed. Each step brought her closer to something she couldn't quite name. At the top, everything was still. She stood for a long time, no one in sight. The lake shimmered silver in the distance. The clouds drifted lazily. The wind moved in gentle strokes. She didn't feel disappointed. She had needed to come just to stand where it all began. Then she saw him, not from afar, not through a lens. He was real, solid and quiet, sitting on a wooden bench by the water's edge, turned away in a dark coat, his silver hair catching the sun. She walked down slowly, no hurry, no noise. Each step was a whisper to herself, be still, listen, be here. He didn't turn when she neared, but she knew he recognized her footsteps. She stopped a few feet away. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. After a while, he broke the silence, still facing the lake. The landscape hasn't changed much. His voice was low, but gentler now, like something softened over time, the edges worn down. She nodded, then remembered. He couldn't see it. "No," she said softly. "It still feels familiar." The silence returned, longer this time. Only the breeze and the faint sound of water moved between them. Finally, he turned. Their eyes met for the first time, without the barrier of a photograph, without the veil of memory. No one smiled. There was no need. He looked at her as if he'd always known her, not her face, but her quiet. And for the first time, she didn't see him as the man from the photo, not the figure online, not the millionaire, not a story, just a person. Someone living, someone aching, someone still trying. "I almost didn't come," he said. "I wasn't sure I wanted to be seen again." "I almost didn't come either," she replied. "So why did you?" She looked out over the lake. "Because I think maybe we don't need to be seen to be saved. Sometimes we just need someone to accept that we're still here." He nodded, lowered his head. Another silence, but not a heavy one. She sat beside him, leaving just enough space between them. It wasn't a distance. It was a breath, a kind of permission. "I'm sorry," she said. He glanced at her. "For what?" She hesitated. "For breaking something open. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't hurt me," he said. "I was already hurt." She looked up. He was staring out across the water, his gaze threaded with thought. "The photo made me look," he said, "not because it was beautiful, but because it was true. I still don't know if I should thank you." "You don't have to," she said. "I didn't do anything. The light did everything," and he smiled just barely. A breeze's smile. A bird swooped across the lake. The flutter of wings stirred soft ripples in the water. She set her camera on her lap, untouched. "I didn't come to photograph," she said. "I know. I just wanted to sit here if you'll let me." "I hoped you would." And so they sat. Two people, two lives, two histories crossing in the same quiet afternoon. They didn't speak again, but some silences don't need filling, and some wounds don't need healing, only to be witnessed. I don't know why I said so much that day. Maybe it was the hush of the lake. Maybe it was the way he didn't interrupt. Or maybe it was the first time someone sat beside me without expecting me to be a version of myself that was easy to understand, easy to like, easy to love. We sat for a long while side by side, eyes on the water glittering with afternoon light. No words passed between us, but the silence wasn't awkward. On the contrary, it felt like shade on a warm day, a place to rest, to exhale, to be. I remember when I started speaking, my voice was barely more than a whisper. I used to think I'd never really connect with anyone. He didn't turn his head, but I knew he was listening. Not the kind of listening that waits to respond, but the kind that lets you know you're real. Since I was little, I always felt out of place, not special, just not quite fitting. Crowds overwhelm me. Small talk drains me. When people laugh too loudly, something in me folds inward and asks for quiet. I let out a soft laugh, not from amusement, but from hearing the tremble in my own voice. The camera has always been the only way I could talk to the world without getting interrupted. Still, he said nothing. But something about his stillness made space for me to go on. That photo, it wasn't really about you or me. It was about something I couldn't name, something quiet and aching and beautiful. And I felt that if I didn't hold on to it, it would vanish like it had never existed. I turned to him. He was looking out over the lake, his eyes no longer guarded, no longer cold, just tired in a way I understood. The kind of tired that comes from holding too much for too long. My wife loved the light in late afternoon, he said, his voice rough, caught in the throat like a leaf stuck between seasons. I didn't respond. I didn't press. She used to say that's when everything got softer. Even people, a pause. After she died, I stopped taking pictures. I deleted them all, walked away from everything. I thought, if the world couldn't see me, maybe I wouldn't have to see myself either. I looked down at my hands, the same hands that once shook when he called, the same ones that hovered over the delete button and couldn't press. I know that feeling, I said. Erasing yourself, just to avoid confronting the fact that you once existed. He nodded slightly. "I was angry with you," he said. "You made me look again." I swallowed hard. Not out of fear, but because I had once been angry with myself too. But because of you, I saw something I hadn't in 3 years. I lifted my head. His eyes were on me, for the first time truly. Not through light, not through distance, but through the gaze of someone who had been lost and was trying to find his way back. "I wasn't trying to fix you," I whispered. "I know," he said. "That's why it's working." We sat there as the sun slipped behind the trees. The light faded but didn't disappear. It wrapped around us, not bright, not showy, but gentle. Just enough to see each other clearly. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how many more times we'd meet. But in that moment, something inside me loosened. Something that had been knotted tight for years. Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to help us move. And some arrive at the right moment in the right place, not to change us, but to sit beside us until we are ready to change ourselves. He didn't say anything else. Neither did I. We simply sat, bathed in the light of the day's end, where silence became the most healing thing of all. That evening, sunset arrived earlier than she expected, or maybe she was simply walking slower, no longer rushing, no longer afraid to miss it. She had learned, some moments aren't meant to be chased. They come when you're ready to receive them. This time she carried nothing but her familiar camera slung over one shoulder. No notebook, no plans, just her footsteps, her heartbeat, and a lightness she hadn't felt in days after finally trying on forgiveness. For him, and for herself. He was already there when she arrived, standing still beneath the golden sky, hands tucked deep into the pockets of his coat, eyes fixed on the horizon as though waiting for something to rise beyond the water. She didn't call out. He turned on his own, not startled, not surprised. Just a quiet nod, like an old melody returning after a long pause. She walked to stand beside him, her shoes rustling through the dry leaves. Neither of them spoke. They stood close enough to hear each other's breath, far enough to let the space remain sacred to them both. She wondered if it still hurt for him, or if the pain had become part of the rhythm now, not sharp, not loud, just a quiet undercurrent in the pulse of living. A background score that never truly ended. The light was gentle now, not radiant, not dramatic. Just warm, like a blanket pulled over the parts of ourselves we once tried to hide. The sky bloomed in shades of rose and violet. The lake mirrored it all, holding nothing. "Before," he said, voice low and even, "I used to think of sunset as an ending." She turned to him. "And now?" He shrugged, a half smile tugging at his mouth. "Now, I think it's just a rest between two pieces of music." She didn't reply, but something inside her let go, like a thin layer of ice across the lake, cracking gently, not from pressure but from the slow warmth of light. She lifted her hand to remove the lens cap. He looked at her. No questions, no nod, but this time his eyes, soft and open, were permission enough. She raised the camera, didn't adjust the angle, didn't seek perfect light, didn't try to make something beautiful. She simply captured what was two people side by side in a light that asked nothing of them. She clicked the shutter. Click. He didn't turn. She didn't lower the camera right away. In that moment, she was no longer the girl hiding from the world behind a lens. And he was no longer the man who disappeared to avoid being hurt again. They were just two people, standing in their second sunset, making an image not meant to be shared, not meant to go viral, not meant to mean anything more than this. Reminder that once they chose to show up. She looked at the image on her screen. It wasn't sharp. The lighting was a little off. A blade of grass had crept into the frame, but she knew. It was the most beautiful photo she had ever taken. He turned to her gently. "This time I knew I was being photographed." She smiled, eyes shining. "And I knew you wouldn't be angry." "No," he said, "because this time I wasn't seen. I chose to be seen." The wind moved through, soft and stirring, and something within her shifted again. She didn't know what the future held. Didn't know if he'd stay in this city. Didn't know if she would keep taking photos or go back to hiding in small, quiet things. But she knew this. Sunset wasn't an ending anymore. It was the last light of the day. Not for looking far ahead, but for looking close. Close enough to see each other. Close enough to not feel alone. Have you ever unknowingly touched someone's pain without realizing it? If this story stirred something in your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it, so we can keep spreading kindness together. Because sometimes, all it takes is a single glance to change someone's life.